Welcome to the Freedom Fridays podcast. With me, your host, Pete Clark, the Whispers guy. Work seems to expand to the time that we give it. And I've been investing my time, occasionally on a Friday, to explore how we use our time, our energy, our attention, and the impact it has on our identity. I've been exploring over season 1 some of the mindset shifts in the handcuffs of I have to the freedom of I choose to. And I've shared some conversations, some tips, some tools about how you might want to invest your own time, your own energy, your own attention. How you might want to, if you choose to, make some changes to your identity. How you might have freedom from I have to and design a life around I choose to. If that's of interest to you, then this is the podcast for you. In season 2, I'm going to be exploring some experts and asking them what freedom means for them. And trying to help people work to live and not live to work. Trying to help people add life to their years and not just years to their life. So let's dive on in, and here's season 2. So welcome to this week's episode of the Freedom Fridays podcast. This week I have a lovely guest with a fantastic personal story, which I'll leave her to share if she wants to. But Emma is an entrepreneur, a business owner, is deeply immersed in most of the change work that clients want to experience. So I'm looking forward to hearing some of her insights. So Emma, welcome to the podcast.
Hi Pete, thanks for having me. Good to see you.
You're welcome, you too. Emma, we normally start with a very broad and open question around freedom. So that's where I'll start. Mm-hmm. In the work that you do with the clients that you work with, what do you see people are seeking freedom from or to?
Yeah, okay, great question. So the work that we do, just building on your intro there, is, principally around change management, business transformation, and looking at businesses' operating models and figuring out what is missing or needs to be tweaked and changed from a organisation design perspective. And in each of those, the golden thread that I see people seeking freedom from is capacity.
Okay, they haven't got the capacity.
They don't have the capacity. They want to change. They know they need to change. They see opportunity, or they see underperformance, they see waste, whatever it is that the issues that they see. I can still boil this down to, we want to have more capacity in our work, in our people, and that is a really stark difference. That's what they want, but what I see is it's a hugely stark difference to where they are. And what I see in workplaces is the complete opposite of capacity, and that is overwhelm.
Yeah.
Like the level of overwhelm in work is just wild. And so, yeah, I guess that's where I would start.
Okay, great start. Let me ask you a couple of questions then. Because I'm similar, and I see some of the symptoms of that too. When people refer to capacity, what do you think they mean, and what actually is capacity?
I don't even know if they recognise that the capacity is the opportunity. Okay. I think they see. I typically have 2 types of clients. I can boil them down to only 2 types. They're either a client that knows what the problem is, what they want to do about it, and they either don't have the capacity within the organisation themselves to do it, or they don't have the specialist expertise. So they're able to be really clear with me about the solve and the need. The other example or type of client that we have is They know there's an issue, but they are just swimming in how do we fix it,
Yeah.
and distilling the themes, let alone how to kind of step through and getting there.
Mm.
So the latter obviously takes a longer time for them to come to the realisation that the opportunity is capacity.
Yeah.
In the former, again, I would say that they don't necessarily lead with capacity. They're leading with probably more business metrics, right? That whether it be financial, whether it be health and safety in terms of well-being, overwhelm, stress, employee turnover, underperformance, presenteeism, all of those other kind of people metrics that we see.
Yeah, the usual suspects. I've mentioned to many people, and it's maybe a sad indictment on all of the work that we do, or work in general, that people are usually the cause of and the solution to most of the problems that we have.
Touche.
And so in a capacity perspective, because where my head went when you mentioned capacity was, a little bit like this glass. Yeah. There's a capacity within the glass.
Yeah.
And if this is 300 mil, whatever it is, if you pour more than 300 mil of liquid into the glass, you're going to be over full. And I wonder if what they mean by capacity is their version of the glass, which for me would be things like time, energy, attention. There seems to be a lot of people trying to do too much with too little, or being asked to do too much with too little. And I haven't got the time. There's always more work to be done at the end of the day. And I haven't got the energy at 5 o'clock that I have at 9 a.m. And I haven't got the attention because I'm bombarded with 25 number one priorities. So my capacity from a time, energy, and attention perspective is just restricted. So I might have a 300 ml glass, but I'm only pouring in 10.
Yes, indeed. And I think it's quite a tricky conversation to have with a prospective client, shall I say, where they want to embark on a change because they need to improve, change, grow, whatever it might be. And my pitch to them is that you're not going to get freedom and capacity. You're not going to fix your level of overwhelm by time management.
Yeah.
Right? Like you have to apply a deeper systems thinking and really go through a pretty comprehensive, well, this is the work that we do, right? Design to be able to get into the roots of your operating model to see what parts, we basically need to start, stop, keep, change, so that we're only working on 5 things instead of 15 things, because that's when your freedom and your capacity improves and your overwhelm comes down. Or when it comes to, or they might be further along in the journey, we often come in with a client whereby they've embarked on a transformation, whatever it might be, and they're in it. They're really overwhelmed. They're totally burnt out. They're trying to run this transformation at the same time managing BAU, particularly if you're a manager, and middle managers are even, are the true tomatoes in the sandwich, right? Yeah. I've lost my train of thought. The work that we need to do with them is further along. Oh, I've lost my train of thought.
That's all right. Let me pick up another observation then. I wonder the extent to which people say capacity is the issue.
Yeah.
Is that a space thing, as in head space, diary space? And I think if that's part of it, then the irony is I observe people, then when they've got space, they fill it anyway.
Yeah, they do. I mean, most people will think, I've observed that most people think about capacity in a bit of a sort of whack-a-mole, right? So, you know, I fix it here, but it just pops up over there.
Yeah.
And fixing it by time management or is shallow.
Yeah.
To come back to what I was trying to get out before around the partway through perhaps a transformation or an agenda, they're completely overwhelmed already they're in that what we call the strategy execution piece. Yep. And they there's an insufficient level of we're focused on the why we need to change more than the what. So they've got a great big vision strategy, but they're having difficulty executing it because they haven't focused or haven't built out sufficiently the detailed end state. So they're working on a change, but they're kind of building that. I think everyone's really familiar and overuses that expression, let's build the plane while we're flying it.
Yeah.
And we wonder why we don't have any capacity.
Yeah.
We wonder why we feel tied to our jobs and can't get home to our families on time.
Yeah. Oh, I hear it all the time. You know, we've got to build the plane whilst doing BAU. Now, so question for you then, in the work that you do, is it even feasible? Or is that just a turn of phrase that ignores the problem? Is it possible to fly the plane whilst we build the plane? One. And if it is possible, how do people do that?
Look, I think it is. And I will say, yes, it is. I think in the sort of 10 or 15 years that I've been playing in this space, that probably only a handful of businesses that I've seen succeed have done a step called change design or architecture before they go into planning mode. And change design and architecturing is more than just a scope. It's more than the strategy, but it very much goes into the detail, clarity, end state of the what. So that when it comes to your planning and your communicating and ultimately your execution and your adoption of it all, you're very clear on what you're moving towards because you've articulated it, right? And you can't get lost in the ambiguity because you're working towards it. You might not be enjoying it. You might not want to move to that particular end point, but at least you know it. And there's freedom in knowing, in having that level of clarity. And that also inherently makes it, and it doesn't matter whether you're a leader or an employee in that scenario, right? You're either the leader that's guiding the organisation and your team through it, you're an employee on the receiving end of it. And yeah, you might not like it, but at least you know. And we talk about, well, what being more important than why, not to say that why isn't important, it absolutely is, but what will get you further along and be able to, I guess, juggle those tension points of, okay, I'm working a job at the moment that's an aeroplane with 3 wings, but I know that in the future I'm going to be working a job that's an aeroplane that's only got 2 wings because I've got the level of detail and I know the steps and I know the tactics that I'm going to take and I know what the expectations of me are before I even need to get there.
Right. Is that ever overwhelming?
Nice little beep. Is that overwhelming? Yeah.
Is that because you mentioned at the start that what they say they want is capacity, but what you observe is overwhelm?
Yes.
Is that what the overwhelm is?
Look, I think the overwhelm, I don't think I personally deduced all of the reasons why people feel overwhelmed.
Yep.
I see it as a consistent thread.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they're not working a transformation agenda, they might just be overwhelmed by the reality of the work environment.
Yeah, of life.
Life pressures, living in a world that's circa 2022.
Yeah.
So the thread of overwhelm is rife, but the reasons for that overwhelm, I think, are really many and varied.
Okay. Are there any usual suspects in those reasons for overwhelm?
Look, time is a big one, and that misalignment of expectation management, like trying to do more with less. I think certainly I've observed in people different mindsets will affect it as well. So if you've got a slightly more closed mindset or a particular way of working, you'll feel like your back's against the wall faster than someone that's open to chance and opportunity and
Right.
change. Yeah.
And do you have any counsel for anyone, a team or organization that kind of gets the idea they have to, balance, ways of working, building the plane whilst still doing the business?
Yeah.
Do you have any counsel on what you've observed, some of the better teams, how they go about balancing those things, knowing, and this would be my particular view, it's never necessarily in balance, but it's the toggling between that's consistent. So you might be over-indexing on BAU one month, but we're back to indexing a little bit on building the U-plane the next month, and back and forth. It's that toggling. Any thoughts on that, and anything you can share from some of the best clients you've worked with in terms of how do they balance those things?
Yeah, I like that term, toggling, and it resonates in that. Yeah, I've absolutely seen organisations and leaders be able to move between the two at different points. I think there's something about having the businesses or the organisations that are seemingly better at it are people and organisations that have pretty firm boundaries.
Okay. Could you share, without revealing any confidential, an example of that?
Just about what people or organisations are willing to take on at certain points in the cycle or juncture. So that can apply at both a personal and a professional level, right? At a professional level, it might be the ability, your adeptness with being able to delegate certain parts of your remit so that you've got different tension points, or it might be at more of an enterprise level, the adeptness in being able to know where different programs and projects of work are at in their life cycle, and knowing when you need and having the wisdom of experience in being able to lean in where you need to be really boots on ground, and then at other periods where you can delegate and step back.
Yeah.
On a personal level, boundaries around how you manage home and family life, and how strict you are between work and home on both sides, right? The ground rules you set up with your family, but also the ground rules you set up with your work family, so you can get that coherence. But it's a constant dance, as you say.
Yeah, it is. I see a lot of people who, probably for some of the right reasons and some of the wrong reasons, probably taking on too much.
Yeah.
Because they're asked to, they feel they have to.
Yeah.
Because I can't say no, because there'll be consequence. I'll lose status, I'll lose position, I'll lose something. And so they grow 5 mile wide shoulders and they take on lots. And, we know the consequence of that, trying to please everyone, you please no one, taking on too much, nothing gets done.
Yes.
And I don't know how much of it is an insecurity thing. I don't know how much of it is a people pleasing thing. I don't know how much of it is not having firm boundaries of self, of family, of work, of home, or this idea of firm boundaries.
Yes.
Do you have a view on that?
Yeah, I do. Well, I've got an experience on it, maybe more so than to get into my Emma the person rather than number 8 consulting, the business and the work that we do. So I started my business when I moved to Adelaide about 4-ish years ago, but prior to that lived in Sydney and, held a number of in-house roles, working in, the sort of large corporates. And I loved my life in Sydney. It was freaking awesome. But at a certain point in time, I knew that I had a really decent amount of even though I really loved my life and my work, I got paid handsomely, an enviable resume of companies that, that I'd worked for. I somehow kind of had this little moment where I was like, I'm still on a hamster wheel. It's a golden hamster wheel, but I'm on a hamster wheel.
Yeah.
And I had enough kind of I guess self-confidence to be able to go, I reckon I can get off this hamster wheel and tap out for a bit and still be able to get back on it at whatever point. And it's not going to railroad my life. It's not going to, and I did. I stepped away from my life in Sydney, my work, went overseas for 6 months, came back to Australia, serendipitously moved to Adelaide. That's a whole nother story.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually kind of started the business. And the thing that I kind of quickly knew was that I could, what I'd learnt and the experience that I'd held in Sydney didn't really exist in the marketplace here in South Australia. So I knew in due course, even though I was creating a business out of thin air and no networks, which is definitely one of the more stupidest things I've done in my lifetime. I've done heaps of stupid things. That eventually, as my network grew, my visibility grew, that I'd sort of bubble to the surface. And that's absolutely and exactly what's happened. In that journey, what has happened is that as I've grown a stronger sense of myself as an individual, what I do and don't like, what I do and don't stand for, what I will and won't do in a work setting, the service offering we do, that's been a really, I'm just going to say organic process, even though I could have been quite strategic about it. I just kind of let it come to. I've now got these amazing boundaries and sense of kind of clarity as a result of that I never would have had I never if I was still back in corporate life. I'm sure of it.
Interesting. You mentioned you were on and I like the expression, the golden hamster wheel. What do you reckon at the time you were seeking freedom from to 4 years later? Is it the same? Or have you recognized it's something different you were seeking freedom from, but you could only see it when you were detached from it?
Yeah. My decision-making process and frame of mind 4.5 or 5 years ago was I'd worked my whole life and I'd worked really hard. I was raised by parents that taught me to believe that hard work will get you where you need to go.
Yep.
And it was probably only in the last maybe 4 or 5 years of my in-house career or chapter of my career that I got the feedback enough times that I was like, oh, I need to pay attention to this, that actually it's not just about working hard, Emma. And that was a bit of a slap in the face, actually.
Right.
Because I'd probably got pretty far by working hard, much further than what I probably personally had an expectation of myself to.
Yeah.
So, you know, taking a break from work was the kind of ultimate cornerstone of let's do this smarter.
Yeah.
let's live life smarter. And
yeah,
I think because I'd worked really hard and for a very long time, and I'd never done my, you know, year abroad when I was 20, as plenty of people do. I really needed to get that out of my system.
Yeah.
When I got back to Australia, and more recently though, my frame is, can you repeat the question again? I know what I want to say, I just can't remember how.
Yeah, I was talking about, you mentioned that you found yourself on this golden hamster wheel.
Yep.
It was well paid, you were kind of good at it,
Yep.
but working hard.
Yep.
At the time, what did you think you were seeking freedom from to get off it?
Yep.
And 4 years later, is
Yep.
it still the same freedom that you're seeking? Or has it changed because you're 4 years detached from the golden hamster wheel?
Yeah. So what I was seeking freedom from originally was how to truly get away from hard work. I think, if I'm really honest with myself,
Okay.
like how to work smarter,
Okay.
right?
Mm-hmm.
In a really crude sense, it was more than that. But like, if I just kind of boil it down to brass tacks.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, it's changed massively. I think that I very much embody living and working smart. I really love my work life in that regards. The reality of running your own business is there's a whole mountain of stress and pressures and challenges that no one gave me the tip off on.
No.
My goodness. So, I'm just in a completely different chapter, exploring freedom in and trying to get freedom in other ways.
Yeah. Can I ask for a friend then? Because I know someone very well, very close to me, who uses hard work as his default of trying to get out of almost every hole that he finds himself in.
Right.
What's involved in working smarter?
What's involved in working smarter?
So do you have a playbook or a framework, rules to live by? Do you have some principles that, Emma Frazer's principles around how she has found her way to working smarter, not necessarily harder?
Yeah, I think there's some things that are probably automated, both at a business and a personal level. So, I used to try and apply willpower to do exercise, whereas now it's scheduled in my diary, right? And I just go, and I've never really thought about whether or not I should go or not. I just go.
Right.
I don't know, I've simplified my wardrobes. I don't overly think about, there's lots of things that we make decisions on that we're not really conscious that we're making decisions on, but actually they just cloud and they add.
Yeah, which takes energy away from.
Yeah, that's right. I've got an amazing assistant that feels very foreign to give admin tasks to, and she has to still, and I've not mastered it, she still, I have a check-in meeting with her, at least once a week. And she's like, right, can I take this away from you and this away from you and this away from you?
Right.
Because I still can't, because I still feel that I can do them myself, even if I've got time. She's like, no, that's not a good use of your time, though, even if you do have the time.
Yeah.
So that that notion of trying to stay at the level of which you're trying to operate, and anything that's below that level, then or above, whatever the kind of right reframe is,
Yeah.
that you're not doing that particular piece of work, so you can stay focused on the bit that is actually most bang for your buck. If I'm thinking about the client work that I do, you know, like I don't overly love managing people, but I was really lucky really early in my, or probably about midway through my, I'm going to say maybe about maybe 8 or 10 years ago, I truly learnt the art of what it is to work as part of a team where the sum of the parts are way more powerful than the individual contributors.
Yeah.
And for anyone that's had that experience, it is chef's kiss. It is there's so much joy and freedom that comes from that. And so if I think about the way that our business model works is when an client engages us, we will create a team specifically for that client. Actually that's how you and I met each other, Pete, when we were working on Boral, right? We create a team that's targeted and specific for the client. And when I do that, I'm really looking to work with people that are in their genius zone. So all I need to do is put the work in front of them and get out of their way. I've been really fortunate to be able to surround myself, I think 9 times out of 10, with people that are way smarter or more experienced than me. And so that I can stay out of their way and that they can do the work that they can do. But there is power in that sum of the parts and coming together. So again, like it's another example where I'm not needing to manage something that I don't even find joy in doing and that is taking away from my energy and or is hard work, right? So I've kind of, I don't know, got to go looking for them a little bit, but there's a few examples.
So again, maybe a personal reflection on me then, about me is I find myself regularly getting stuck. And I don't know, probably a combination of all of the above. Is it ego? Is it expertise? Is it insecurity? Is it whatever it might be that the client wants me?
Yep.
And I don't know to what extent actually is it me who wants the client, so I don't allow space for anyone else because I'm insecure, whatever it might be. Have you found that, you know, you get the client contact, you get the opportunity and they meet Emma for the first time, they go, Emma's awesome.
Yeah.
Or who's this? I don't want this Pete guy. I want Emma. So have you come across that? I'm assuming you have. And then how do you navigate that when either you do or you don't want to do the work, but you know probably longer term there's a boundary that needs to be in place that it can't always be you?
Yeah, I probably have always, touch wood. I don't think I've ever gone into a client scenario where I'm presenting the business as just me.
Okay.
So I will always be presenting, again, touch wood, 9 times out of 10, a group of people that are working on a client's problem. And that will play out in maybe 2 or 3 ways. One is whereby I end up doing all of the work and, you know, if I've got the bandwidth to, then, you know, no problem, happy days. The other scenario is whereby I can see that there's particular packages of work that the client need that require particular subject matter experts. Yep. So I'm positioning a particular type of change consultant that might be around communications, might be around stakeholder engagement. They might have a bent around mergers and acquisitions or operating model design, whatever it may be. So I'll put that person front and centre on that particular part of the project that we're working on. And then maybe the third scenario is I'll position myself as the engagement manager. So I still own and manage and run the relationship with the client.
Yep.
Own and manage and run the team, but the team are doing the work.
Right. I've got a long way to go.
It's trial and error. Like, I should possibly sound more confident in all of that than what I actually am. But
one thing I'm interested in, if you would share your view, it's often quoted, and I think it's quoted erroneously, and it seems to be quoted by the change firms, where 70% of change efforts fail.
Yep.
Right. I don't know where that figure comes from. I've done a bit of research and no one can seem to point to it. It's kind of like out of thin air, because it means you have to engage another change firm to do the work, because 70% are going to fail. Two questions. Is it true? And does it matter if it's 70% or 62? Does it, is it true? Does it matter? And secondly, to make it work, then, if someone's going to engage in transformation, what are some non-negotiable things that have to happen to give them at least a chance of success?
Okay. Yes, it's true. Could be 60, could be 95. But yeah, I've seen enough client examples to where they're running, multiple changes or programs and they're just not getting through.
Right.
They're just not. I think probably what is skewed is that it's not complete failure.
Yeah.
It's that if we use the 70%, it's that you haven't got your complete return on investment.
That was expected.
So I think it would be, what I've observed is that really smart, experienced, either transformational leaders or consultants have a strategy and have a mandate and have a scope, but they know full very well that it would be Pollyanna-ish to think of them to think that would go in as an exact like for like as it was originally intended. So there's a level of incompleteness, fudge factor, and so it takes more time. It's not it's not an exact replica of what we said we do in terms of the solution. It costs a bit more. Like, I don't see that as failure, by the way. Like, if your goal of your organisation is to introduce robotics technology, and at the end of the day, you introduce that robotics technology, but it takes you a year longer and costs you an extra $150 million, you've still got it in. It takes you longer to get your ROI back than what your accountant said it would, but it's still in. You're still operating that tech, right? So that, I think, is a bit kind of, it's a headline stat, but it's important to read around the detail.
Yeah. Cognitive candy.
Totally. I prefer, I was thinking earlier today around, gosh, social media has been good for pithy one-liners and memes. I was like, I like them, but I actually really like a good analogy more than to get my point across than a good quote, to be honest. What was the second half?
Yeah, so the second part of that question is, okay, so it's true, right? Most change efforts don't realise the benefits that they could have realised at the start line. So if they want to realise more of those benefits, what are some non-negotiables in your experience? And I'd be interested if you could split it into kind of overt non-negotiables. You got to have this in place. You got to have this as a minimum standard. But you know what? As you get into it, once you cross the start line, you got to have these covert things in place as well. Otherwise, you stand no chance of getting any return. Are there kind of 2 or 3 usual suspects, main principles, big rocks that sit in that space of, you got to have these 3 things in place covertly, and a watch out for these 2 things?
Yeah, I think probably the really big overt one that I would call out is, you really need to have clarity of what your end state is. And that is more than just a vision and or a problem statement or your why.
Yep.
You can only capture the hearts and minds of people based on concept before they need the detail. And you will possibly do more harm than good if you stay in concept for too long without pulling them through and explaining knowing and being able to explain what the detail is.
Right. And is that a mistake you observe people make? Is they stay too high, they stay too much in concept?
Yeah,
it's just a bit too grey.
Concept. Yeah, and how you know how an internal change practitioner or an astute business leader will know that they don't have enough detail is that you won't be able to articulate the impact to people.
Right.
You just can't do it. If you don't know where you're heading, or if that's only in concept, then it's really hard to then be able to understand what the impact is. And if you don't understand what the impact is, then you can't figure out what the tactics are that you need to give to an enterprise, a function, a team, an individual in order for them to change.
So it's kind of like and forgive the phrase here, it's kind of like a good gotcha question, isn't it? Yeah. With your stakeholders, if you ask that question and depending on how they articulate it, it gives you a good sense of, do we have clarity here?
Yeah, yeah.
Beyond the dream state of revenue number and EBIT number.
That's right. You can have a scope, you can have a business case, you can, you can have your modelling, but that is not an end state. That is not clarity to the extent that the people that are ultimately impacted by it and that you want them to do something differently that we're talking about here. They don't care about the return on investment. They just care about what you want me to do differently.
Yeah. Is there anything else? Any other big rocks?
I think the other one that I look, there's heaps, but probably the other one that I often find myself talking to clients, current or prospective, about is this. It's a really simple framework or model that goes northeast, southwest. It's got 4 quadrants to it, and it applies to changes that are radical in nature, where you have change at a group level, but also at an individual level. Then you know that there is change that is both tangible and intangible. Mm-hmm. So if you kind of break down those 4 quadrants, there's one quadrant that is at an individual and intangible level in terms of how they're being impacted by change.
Okay.
And that is really people's EQ. I would also put in there that is people's adult levels of maturity, where a person might sit on a curve.
Yeah.
We know that exists, but we can't see it.
Could you explain that? Because I'm sure anyone listening, you're not dealing with adults all the time. And I think I know what you mean by that.
Yes.
But could you maybe just explain what you mean by adult maturity?
I wish I kind of had the reference in front of me, but the basic notion of it is that, yes, we're all adults, but we actually have different levels of maturity in terms of probably I'll say our emotional state. So some of us might have high levels of emotional intelligence, self-awareness, resilience. There's, I don't know, probably a myriad of factors that of which people can handle. So if you come across an adult that has a low level of maturity, their ability, they'll be able to lose, you'll know, because they lose their temper really easily, or they can't control themselves. Someone that has a high level of maturity is able to control their emotional state to a much higher degree.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by that.
Okay.
But then there's also the tangible side of an individual, which we can see, which is our behaviours, and we can measure those things. And there's lots of, work and means and tools that we can apply to be able to move that. Then at a group level, both tangible and intangible. Tangible is the processes, the strategies, all of the visible things that we do to wrap around how to move a whole business and the people within it through change. On the intangible side, I don't know, I largely call it culture, but what's included in the intangible side at a group level is norms, power and politics.
Mm-hmm.
We know they exist, but we can't see them.
Yeah.
And so when I look at businesses that are wanting to move an organisation, a whole organisation through change, they're really focused on the tangible side and have very low regard for the fact that there's anything going on in the intangible side. Yet the reality is it's the intangible side that actually blocks the change. The elephant and the rider. The rider is the tangible side, cannot, an 80 kilogram human cannot move an 8-ton elephant by force, but it can by motivation.
Yeah, I think that's the example used in, I think it's called the happiness hypothesis. Around change, that our conscious mind is the rider of the elephant, and you've got a little stick and we tap the elephant's ear and on the left and it goes left if the elephant wants to ultimately. But the unconscious or intangible side, if it fancies going right and you've tapped left, it'll go right. No matter what the little rider does. So it's a good analogy. So in my experience around change has been, you've got to appeal to both.
Indeed.
You've got to appeal to the rider and the elephant.
Indeed. And you've got to appeal to, or you've got to have a level of awareness that all of the strategies and planning in the world will only get you so far. That working on, spending time and or money, whatever it is, thinking about and working on what are the intangible sides at both an individual and a group level to be able to move an organisation and people through change is part of the equation. And so how you choose to structure that change, the people that you put in it to facilitate and or drive and or sponsor and or govern it, become really important topics to get right and to change when they're not working. Just tap it out and change it. It's fine. Apply agile thinking and iterative, learning and until it does get right.
Hey, I'm conscious of your bandwidth because I know you're in the middle of a house move. So maybe just a couple of more questions from me, then we'll pause. For people that are interested in the sort of change, the transformation space, how do they get hold of you?
Yeah, good question. You can find us, we, through our website, no8, the number, consulting.com, short for number 8 consulting. Or you can find me on LinkedIn. My name's Emma Frazer.
With a Z.
With a Z. EMMAFRAZER.
Cool. And we'll put all these things in the show notes too.
Perfect. Sounds great.
A couple of quick fire questions then. I'm going to try and make it house related.
Sure.
Are you the sort of person that packs your own stuff up, or do you outsource that?
I pack my own stuff up.
Are you the sort of person that takes everything with you and sorts it out when you get there, or do you go through the sorting out before you leave?
I sort it out before I leave. 100%. I'm
And,
ruthless.
and I'm guessing you've moved a few times. How many boxes do you carry around from house to house without even opening them?
My laundry's full of boxes that are ready to go from 4.5 years ago.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you haven't opened them yet.
Yeah, they're just books, and I don't own a
Yeah.
bookshelf. So unlike your beautiful backdrop there.
Yeah. And the house that you're going to, without revealing any confidence or addresses or anything like that, what's the feeling you get when you think about it?
The feeling that I get is it looks more impressive than I think it's very impressive. And I think that might be a bit misleading for people when that I'm perhaps a little bit more adult and capable than what I necessarily see in myself.
Well, as we know, Emma, never let the truth get in the way of a good story.
Totally.
Yeah. Emma, it's been a pleasure chatting to you. Thank you for some of the insights you've shared. Thank you for sharing some of yourself and some of those changes that you've made. I really appreciate your vulnerability there.
Thanks. Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
You're welcome.